Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Acharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajak Acharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 27. Tokena Jiva Haranam Yat Ulukikaya Trimasikasya Cha Pada Shakata Apavrita Yat Ringata Antara Antaragatena Divi Sprisho Va Unmulanam Tu Itarata Arjunayo Nabhavyam Tokena Jiva Haranam Yat Tokena Jiva Haranam Yadulukikayas Trimasikasya Chapada Shakato Pavrittaha Yadringatantaragatina Divisprisharva Unmulanam Tvitaratarjunayor Nabhavyam. Slower? We chanted it yesterday? Okay, thank you. Okay, text 28. Yadvai Vraje Vraja Pashun Vishatoya Pitan. Palam stva jiva yad anugraha drishti vrishtya. Takchudaye tivishavirya vilola jivam. Uchatayishyad uragam viharan hridinyam. Yadvai vraje vraja pashun vishatoya pitan. Alam stva jiva yadanugraha drishti vrishtya. Takchudaye titvishavirya vilola jivam. Uchatayisyad uragam viharan hridinyam. Yadvai vraje vraja pashun vishatoya pitan. Alam stva jiva yadanugraha drishti vrishtya. Takchudaye tvivishavirya vilola jivam. Uchatayisyad uragam viharan hridinyam. Yadvai vraje vraja pashun vishaya pitan.
Palams Sijivayat Anugraha Rishtivishya
Vrishti vrishtya.
Achudayeti Vishavirya Vilola Jivam
Prachudayeti Vishavirya Vilola Jivam.
Uchatayisharurugam viraham hridinyam.
Uchatvayishaduragam Viharan Hridinyam. Lan, the cowherdmen. 2. Also, Ajivayat, brought to life. Anugraha Drishti, merciful glance. Vrishtya, by the showers of. Tat, that. Shudaye, for purification. Ati, exceedingly. Vishavirya, highly potent poison. Vilola, lurking. Shivam, one who has such a tongue. Uchatayishyat, severely punished. Urugam, unto the snake. Viharan, taking it as a pleasure. Hridinyam, in the river. Then also, when the cowherd boys and their animals drank the poisoned water of the river Yamuna, and after the Lord in his childhood revived them by his merciful glance, just to purify the water of the river Yamuna, he jumped into it as if playing, and chastised the venomous Kalia snake, which was lurking there, its tongue emanating waves of poison. Who can perform such Herculean task but the Supreme Lord? Tat karma divyam iva yan nishayanam davagnina shuchivane paridayamane uneshyati vrajam ato vasitanta kalam nitre pidapya sabalo nadigamya viryaha. On the very night of the day of the chastisement of the Kalia snake, when the inhabitants of Rajabhumi were sleeping carefreely, there was a forest fire ablaze due to dry leaves, and it appeared that all the inhabitants were sure to meet their death. But the Lord, along with Balaram, saved them simply by closing his eyes. Such are the superhuman activities of the Lord. Purport. Although in this verse, the Lord's activity has been described as superhuman, it should be noted that the Lord's activities are always superhuman, and that distinguishes him from the ordinary living being. Uprooting a gigantic banyan tree or Arjuna tree, or extinguishing a blazing forest fire simply by closing one's eyes are certainly impossible by any kind of human endeavor. But not only are these activities amazing to hear, but in fact, all other activities of the Lord, whatever he may do, are all superhuman, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Whoever knows the superhuman activities of the Lord, due to their very transcendental nature, becomes eligible to enter the kingdom of Krishna. And as such, after quitting this present material body, the knower of the transcendental activities of the Lord goes back home, back to Godhead. Maharaj, should you like to speak on this? Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Purjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tadaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. I'll just read the verses one more time. Then also when the cowherd boys and their animals drank the poisoned water of the river Yamuna, and after the Lord in his childhood revived them by his merciful glance, just to purify the water of the river Yamuna, he jumped into it as if playing and chastised the venomous Kalia snake, which was lurking there, its tongue emanating waves of poison. Who can perform such Herculean tasks but the Supreme Lord? On the very night of the day of the chastisement of the Kalia snake, when the inhabitants of Rajabhumi were sleeping carefreely, there was a forest fire ablaze due to dry leaves, and it appeared that all the inhabitants were sure to meet their death. But the Lord, along with Balaram, saved them simply by closing his eyes. Such are the superhuman activities of the Lord. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that one who knows the transcendental nature of his appearance and his activities doesn't take birth again in this material world, but enters the, as Prabhupada says in the purport here, kingdom of Krishna. So what is that transcendental nature? Everything that Krishna does is beyond time and space. He explains in the Bhagavad Gita that yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanama dharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. And then also, what is the ones with sambhavami yuge yuge? Well, so the first one, when there's a rise of irreligion and a decline of religion, he descends at that time to reestablish religious principles. And then also when he also descends to protect his devotees and annihilate the demons or the miscreants, millennium after millennium. And sorry, I'm forgetting the beginning of that one that ends with Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam. No, that's the one that one. Pritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstarpanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So he appears for his devotees and to annihilate the demons. But Prabhupada explains in the purport to that verse that Krishna doesn't really need to appear to annihilate the demons, because it's only by his mercy that anything is happening in this world at all. If he wants to, he can send any one of his agents to get rid of the demons. Could be in the form of an earthquake or a hurricane, or their lungs just stop working. Anything. He's sustaining everything. So he doesn't need to personally come in his personal form to get rid of them. But he comes for the sake of his devotees, because they want to serve Krishna, and he comes and gives them that opportunity to serve him and engage in that relationship with the Lord. And they're also feeling separation from him, so he comes to relieve them of that separation. And that's the only way that his devotees can be relieved of that separation and serve him face to face, is if he personally comes. So Krishna comes out of love for his devotees. That's why he comes to the material world. Otherwise, he can send anybody to do all of these other tasks. So he's beyond time, because it's not that he's restricted. It's not that every couple of months or every so many yugas, he has to come. At that time, his alarm goes off and boom, he's got to descend to the material world. No, but it's out of his sweet will and out of his love for his devotees, he decides to come to the material world for this loving exchange with the devotees. And also, I remember reading in one purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam how the devotees, they just want to chant about these different pastimes of the Lord. So he appears in this world to give them something to chant about, and he does all these different activities. So he's not bound by time. There's no one dictating, okay, you must come now. There's this many demons, and it's your job to clean them up. He doesn't need to do that, but he comes out of love for his devotees. And then he's not bound by space either. One amazing thing about Krishna, although everything about him is amazing, is that he is smaller than the smallest, and at the same time, he's bigger than the biggest. Some yogis, they can become a little small, they can become a little bit big, but Krishna, he's simultaneously in every atom, and then at the same time, he has his universal form, and then at the same time, he's also medium-sized. He comes in his original form that's similar to a human being. So that's Krishna. He's not bound by time and space. He's transcendental to all these things. The material modes of nature, they can't affect him. Everyone in the material world, every conditioned soul is bound by the modes of material nature. But those modes of material nature are coming from Krishna. So even when he appears in this world, he's never bound by them. He's always transcendental. So Therefore, any activity that Krishna does is superhuman. Even whatever may seem like the simplest thing, his smiling as a baby, or him crawling as a baby, or when he first rolls over as a baby and they have a whole celebration. Every activity he does is superhuman because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he's transcendental. He's beyond time and space. No other living being is like that, except for his pure devotees, because he explains that one who surrenders unto him and is always meditating on him, they attain his nature. So they become in quality just like the Lord. So his devotees also become beyond time and space. Like when Krishna went to when he went to there were two of his devotees inviting him and his party to take prasadam at their homes. And Krishna, he was with all of the greatest munis and rishis and devotees that we hear about in the Bhagavatam. Narada Muni was there, and I think Vyasadeva and Parshuram, and so many of these different great personalities that we hear about in the Bhagavatam. They were in his party. And so one great king invited him to his palace, and then one devotee who is just a simple poor brahmana invited him to his home. So what Krishna did is he expanded himself and went to both places at the same time. But not just himself, he also expanded his devotees, the ones that were with him. And they all, there were two sets of this party of Krishna and his devotees, and they both went to the homes at the same time and were very much appreciative of the loving offerings of both devotees who invited them. So like this, his devotees also become transcendental. They also become beyond time and space. We see in that pastime, those different munis and rishis that were with him, they also expanded and had an exact replication of themselves, and not like the way that materialistic yogis do it, where it's kind of, they can expand a few times, but it's kind of like when you look at a TV, one thing moves and on the other television set, it's moving at the exact same time in the same way. Normal yogis can do that in the material world. But Krishna and his pure devotees, they can do these things where they can be in multiple places at one time. We hear of Narada Muni doing this sometimes. So everything that the Lord does is superhuman. And his pure devotees are also superhuman in this way, that they get the same quality as the Lord. So this is one miraculous feature of the Lord. And everything he does is superhuman because it's not bound by the modes of material nature. And then same with his devotees. All of their activities, just like in our conditioned state, like myself and other conditioned souls in the material world, when we do some activity, it stems from the modes of nature. Okay, so I'm in ignorance, so then therefore I go and sleep. Or I'm feeling passionate and then I have to go and eat, or whatever it is. You know, the modes of nature, they have their effect and then the activity happens. But Krishna and his pure devotees, they're not bound by the modes of nature. All of their activities are stemming from the platform of pure love for Krishna. So the devotee in the spiritual world, the way that everyone is acting, there's no tinge of these material modes of nature. All of their activities are happening out of this desire of love for Krishna, whatever they do, even if it looks like anger or looks like sadness or some other thing. It's all stemming from this desire of love for Krishna, wanting to serve him. And same with Krishna's activities. He wants to serve his devotees. So all of his desires are stemming from this platform of pure love, which is only there in the spiritual world. So in this way, everything that he does and that his devotees do is transcendental or superhuman, even if it's just a simple thing, something they say or something they a glance or Krishna's smile. All of these things are completely transcendental because they're not stemming from the modes of nature. So like this, if we purify our desires, then we can also have superhuman activities in the sense that they will all be on the basis of coming from pure love for Krishna. So a pure devotee, when he acts, it's out of love for Krishna, not just out of the modes impelling somebody to act. And when one gets a nature like the Lord, they become eligible to enter the kingdom of the Lord. And after quitting this material body, the person who attains this nature like the Lord, they go back home, back to Godhead. So it's a win-win situation. If one hears the pastimes of the Lord, they become purified and they get qualities like the Lord's, and then they go back to Krishna. So they don't have to be in this material world anymore and experience birth, death, disease, and old age. So it's much better than hearing all of the materialistic things that people are incessantly hearing nonstop in the material world. So these activities, they can be broadcast far and wide in many ways, just like we have the Bhagavatam class. And by attending classes on Srimad Bhagavatam regularly, all the inauspicious things in the heart are destroyed almost to nil. And then we also broadcast the Bhagavatam class. So that's a nice way to share it. And people can do so many different activities in order to share these pastimes of the Lord, and in this way purify all the living entities in the world and purify even the entire atmosphere. Even movies and media and so many different things can be used to broadcast these activities of the Lord. And it's amazing because since they are, the Lord and his activities are transcendental, they both just get better and better. They never get hackneyed. They never become stale. So just like somebody puts out a movie and someone can watch it a few times, but it gets boring. And then they go and they make a sequel and it's just the same old thing. It's not very interesting. They make a few sequels and then they have to pretty much stop making the movie. People get bored of it. But Krishna's activities, if somebody were to make a movie of Krishna's activities, you can make 1,000 movies out of the same pastime, and it's just gets better and better. Just like we can read about the same pastime year after year, month after month, and it gets better and better. So that's the nature of something spiritual, and that's the nature of Krishna and of spiritual life. So that's why when we meet people, we can recommend to them that they take these books of Srila Prabhupada and hear these purifying activities of Krishna, because unlike everything else that they will find in the material world that will become stale and will just entangle them more in the material world, if they hear these pastimes of Krishna, they'll become liberated from the material world and go back home, back to Godhead. So we can recommend it. The nice analogy that's given for all the material activities and material things to hear about and try material things to try to enjoy, it's called chewing the chewed. Just like when there's some sugar cane. In America, people usually say gum more often because we know about chewing gum. But in India, they have sugar cane everywhere. And if you juice it on a grinding stone, you get a cup full of really nice juice. But if you take that cane, the sugar cane, after it's already been juiced and someone's already chewed on it some more and gotten all the flavor out of it, and then try to taste it again, there's almost nothing there, just some raw husk. So that's like materialistic activities, because we're not material. So as we hear in the Bhagavad Gita, Dehi nashminyata dehe kamaromyo vanamjra tata dehantara praptir dirastatra namuyati. The soul is just passing from boyhood to youth to old age. And similarly, the soul passes to another body at death, the embodied spirit soul. It's passing from body to body. And the self-realized person is not bewildered by such a change. So since we're not the body, we're not material, we're a fully spiritual being, nothing material can actually satisfy any living entity. So that's why it's like chewing the chewed. Any material activity, any material entertainment, any material service, it gets old, and it doesn't ultimately help anybody because they're not material. So they need something spiritual for sustenance. And that comes in the form of the Srimad Bhagavatam and of Krishna's activities and of his holy name. So we can endeavor to give these to people, and we'll become even more satisfied, because Krishna explains that one who is preaching the science of the Bhagavad Gita, that person is the most dear to him. So if we try to bring others back to Krishna, that's the there's nothing more ecstatic. We'll be fully satisfied. Krishna is pleased, and those living entities who become extremely fortunate, they also become pleased. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Jagannath Prabhu.
I was just wondering if because I'm not really like, I get the concept of chewing the chewed, but I don't understand why material things don't make us happy. Like I get that you said that we're not material, we're spiritual, but like,
Have you seen the picture in the Spanish Perfection of Yoga of the fish holding the cigarette?
no.
That's really wonderful. There's a nice BBT illustration of a fish, and he's at the beach, and he's right by the water, but he's not in it. He's on the sand, and the hot sun's beaming down on him, and you can see he's sweating, and he looks miserable. He looks like he just wants to be in the water because that's his natural habitat, but he's not in the water. And even though people are giving him every possible type of enjoyment, he's got a play fish magazine with the lady fish on it. He's got like a hamburger or a hot dog. He's got some sort of a drink. There you go. He's got a cigarette. He's got everything that he could possibly try to enjoy his senses with, but he's not in his natural habitat. So he'll just suffer, and he'll dry up. So like that, because we're not in our natural habitat of spiritual engagement and service to Krishna in the spiritual world, nothing outside of our habitat will make us happy. We're like a fish out of water when we come to this material world. So see, he's out of his habitat in the picture, so he can't be happy. But if you put him back in the water, immediately he's happy in whatever activity he does, because that's where he's actually meant to be. That's where his nature is coming from. So like that, if we hear about the transcendental activities of Krishna, we ourselves become Krishnized, transcendental. By hearing about those qualities, we also gain those qualities and become eligible to go back to our natural home, Krishna Loka, or in the spiritual world. And then that way we're actually pleased. But as long as we're out of the water, nothing will make us happy. We're like the fish flopping around. And it flops over this way, maybe it'll stop burning. It flops over that way, and maybe that'll make him happy, but he's never satisfied. And if we look at any material activity and think, okay, maybe that'll make me happy. If we think about it a little bit, it doesn't make much sense. Every materialistic activity for enjoyment in the world is pretty weird. Like we see that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains that the most binding force in the material world is this sex life. But as many devotees have explained before, what is this sex life? It's simply the putting together of two urinals, two urinary organs coming together, and someone spends their whole life fixated on that, the nastiest part of somebody's body. Their mind and consciousness is just making that their goal of life. So we see any kind of material endeavor for happiness, if that's the culmination of it, then it's kind of weird. But if we hear about spiritual activities, like, okay, we just heard Krishna, he's dancing on a giant poisonous snake who's emanating waves of poison that, kill anybody that goes near it. and he's dancing on it and having a good time. And at the same time, one of Krishna's qualities is that he is he's very expert, which means he can do multiple things at the same time. No, sorry, I mix it up. He's very clever, which means he can do multiple things at the same time. He's also expert, but that means he can do a task quickly. But he's clever because he can do multiple things at the same time, and explains in the Nectar of Devotion. So there's a quote there where one of his devotees is saying, look at how clever Krishna is. He's able to subdue Aristasura, and at the same time, he's making nice loving glances to the gopis, and they're feeling very pleased by this. So like this, he's chastising this huge venomous snake, and at the same time, he's saving his devotees and like dancing in a who could say that's not enjoyable and that's not amazing? And getting to serve Krishna, who's the supreme lovable object for everybody. It's the most beautiful, most strong. He has all the most amazing qualities. How could anybody say that's not enjoyable? But then you hear about any materialistic activity, and any person you meet, they can refute how whatever materialistic activity you're into, to them, it actually isn't enjoyable. And if someone with a little bit of knowledge speaks to them, we can see all those activities are ultimately kind of strange. So we can go on hearing about the Lord's activities, and in this way, develop a desire to serve the Lord. And then in this way, get back to our natural transcendental nature and go back to Godhead. And we can help others do that through this book distribution, Harinam, Prasadam distribution, Krishna conscious farm communities, nice preaching centers. Anything else? Any other things? Nice, yeah, very nice deity worship. If the deity is not happy, Prabhu is explaining this. If the deities aren't happy, then the devotees won't be happy. Of course, they're the boss, and Krishna's in everybody's heart. So if there's a nice quote from Srila Prabhupada that if you dress the form of the Lord nicely, you try to make the form of the Lord, which is already beautiful, more beautiful, you also become more beautiful. So like that, if we care nicely for the Lord, and not just in a ritualistic way, but actually remembering that he's a person. So with real care, we care for the Lord, then we'll also be happy as well. This is a small point that I made. And Krishna, this is the last point, Krishna also extinguished the blazing forest fire simply by closing his eyes. So how amazing is that? People look for protection and shelter in so many places in the world, but when there was this most dangerous thing happening, the devotees of Krishna, they took shelter of him, and all he did was close his eyes, and the problem was solved. So nobody else can do that. No defense committee is able to do that. No anything. So Krishna, everything he does is superhuman, and we should endeavor to serve him and his superhuman devotees and become transcendental and go back to Godhead and help others do so. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.